Okay, this meeting is called to order. Would you call a roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Studebaker.
Here.
Councilor Mans.
Here.
O'Neill.
Here.
Lamont.
Here.
Wynn.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
And Kohlhoff. Thank you.
All right, would you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Teresa, you can remain sitting. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're going to go into executive session. Mr. Powell, would you read the spiel for that, please?
Well, thank you, Mayor. The Lake Oswego City Council will now be going into an executive session under the authority of ORS 192.660 subsection 2E to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions, and also subsection F to consider records that are exempt by law from public inspection. Representatives of the news media and designated staff will be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session. No final decision will be made in the executive session, and at the end of that session, the City Council will return to this room and will resume its open session.
All right, thank you. We're adjourned for executive session. Okay, we're back in session after our executive session. And the first item of business is citizen comment. I have a request from Mr. Scott Handley.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Handley, a resident of the Palisades neighborhood. I'm here today representing 900-plus residents who signed the petition to save Cooks Butte. Over the last 12 weeks, I listened to these residents' many frustrations with their city's disregard for the community it represents on a number of topics. Their disappointment was resounding when hearing this was the third attempt by the city over 25 years to exploit a provision in the Cooks Butte deed, when this land was clearly intended and reinforced multiple times to remain a nature preserve. Natural areas like Cooks Butte belong to the community. They are part of our culture, our values. They are quickly vanishing in our society and need to be preserved and protected. We acknowledge this City Council's motion last session authorizing city staff to inform Clackamas 800 Radio Group that due to the withdrawal of consent from the Emery family, the city is unable to allow a telecommunications tower to be constructed at Cooks Butte. Case closed. We now encourage the city to never put itself in a similar position where the citizens are unable to discuss major developments or issues with their elected representatives that impact our community, our way of life. We expect our public servants to represent and balance the values of our community over those of special interests. We expect frequent, open, and honest two-way communication between citizens, our elected representatives, and other city officials. We expect better and more plentiful notice to the community, not just a few residents or conveniently and seemingly tucked away in a city council session somewhere. We expect transparency. Only then can we build a framework of trust upon which we can reach common ground. I hope that this is a lesson for this council, city officials, and those that follow to recognize the community as an equal partner. And we will engage with you and hope that you engage with the community early and often before making commitments that may be at odds with the residents of this fine community. Thank you.
Okay. First item of business is on study sessions, and the first item is on Lake Oswego Tigard Water Program Asset Repair and Maintenance.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Erica Rooney, Engineering Director and in charge of the water treatment plant. I have with us this evening Carrie Duncan, who is our water treatment plant manager. She's going to do the presentation on the asset repair and replacement strategy that we have going forward for the future. Go ahead, Carrie.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Studebaker and members of the council. Thank you for having me here today. As Erica said, I'm Carrie Duncan, the water treatment plant manager. The study session topic today is on the Lake Oswego Tigard Water Partnership Asset Repair and Replacement Strategy. The presentation and information we will cover was also presented to the Lake Oswego Tigard Oversight Committee meeting at the July meeting. In 2017, the cities of Lake Oswego and Tigard completed construction of water supply and treatment facilities that now provide both cities with their drinking water. As part of this project, the cities have committed to budget for ongoing renewal, repair, and replacement expenses for the supply facilities and all of their equipment. Just to provide a little background on this topic, a year after substantial completion of the project, the intergovernmental agreement between Lake Oswego and Tigard required that an asset inventory was to be completed. Brown and Caldwell was the engineering design firm, or the engineering firm that completed this inventory. And that inventory includes things like the current value of all of our assets, the repair and replacement costs of those items, and also a schedule for repair and replacements based on the useful life of each piece of equipment and facility and structure that we have as part of the partnership. Part of our IGA stipulated that each party shall budget and pay for the renewal, repair, and replacement costs proportional to their ownership interest in the supply facilities. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of slides that will help us understand how we got to some of the costs we are going to present here today. What we did was, in order to determine the value of all of our assets, it was determined that all of the assets in the ground for the Lake Oswego Tigard Partnership in today's dollars totaled $169 million. The study also included a schedule of repair and replacement activities and the expected cost of these. So for example, that asset replacement amount only accounts for replacing things one time, the actual value. However, for some assets such as a pump, or most of our assets, you may replace those multiple times over the life cycle of the total project. And what we are looking at is a 50-year planning horizon. So a pump may be rebuilt every 5 years and then replaced every 15 to 20 years. And so that's where you get that total cost that we looked at. We analyzed the total asset repair and replacement cost to be $244 million. That includes all repair and replacement activities through 2091. Staff then took those numbers and took a closer look at each individual line item. We had huge spreadsheets in there. And the revised asset repair and replacement for a 50-year time frame was $180 million. One of the items we did do in that was we removed items that were under $5,000, which we already cover in our annual operation and maintenance budget. So the goal is to develop a business plan and an annual reserve in order to fund future repair and replacement needs. We don't require each city to use the same funding approach, although I'll state that Tigard is also looking at this as well. What it specifies is that each city does need to budget and develop a reserve of some type for replacement, and that when items are due for replacement, each city will commit to that. We're looking at a 50-year plan. We also do believe that the estimates in our analysis were very conservative. So they were presenting something that would be either a best management practice or a very conservative estimate. You can see in this table the cost allocation according to the facilities for the partnership, the Bonita Pump Station, pipeline, reservoirs, river intake, and water treatment plant, and also the percentage of ownership between each partner. Those were the values that were used to allocate each partner's responsibility for replacement. For example, you can see the Bonita Pump Station in Tigard is 100% allocated to Tigard, so Lake Oswego does not owe any money or to replace items in that structure. Our largest assets, the river intake pump station, known as the RIPS, and the water treatment plant are allocated based on the 1 million gallon a day ownership capacity for the plant. To look at the total cost over a 50-year time frame, if you divide each share for each city, that comes out to $92.7 million for the city of Tigard and $86.9 million for the city of Lake Oswego. That's an average annual cost for the 50-year planning horizon of $1.9 million in Tigard and $1.8 million in Lake Oswego. The maximum annual cost at the bottom, what that means is assets don't come up for replacement or repair at the same rate. So we may have some years where we're replacing a lot of items, such as a big capital project, other years where there's very little, and so that's why this is something that accrues over time. So probably the largest predicted year was 16.5 million and 15.9 million, and that's 2065, so we've got a few years to go here.
We won't be on council then.
So what staff have been working on is providing a variety of options for creating a renewal and replacement fund. And so I'm going to present 3 options that we have looked at and talk about their pros and cons. So option number 1 is to reserve 1% annually, both Lake Oswego and Tigard to reserve 1% annually. What 1% is the percentage of the total replacement and renewal value. And so for combined, that's 1.8 million per year. And in Tigard, that would be 927,000, Lake Oswego 869,000. As you can see, if we saved at that rate, there would be, I'm going to try to use this here, a funding shortfall right around 2030 based on the planned schedule. And so at that point, the cities would need to seek some additional funding to replace what is needed. Option 2 is reserve 1.5% annually. That's a combined 2.7 million. In Tigard, 1.4 million, and in Lake Oswego, 1.3 million. That takes us out quite a number of years further, out to 2045, before we run into a funding shortfall when, as assets age, we have a certain amount, and so we would have a small shortfall at that time. I think it's important to note that Tigard debt retires in 2046 and Lake Oswego debt retires in 2038. So those are some benchmarks which we relied on for option 3, which is called an inclining block strategy. So the reserve percentage increases in blocks over time. This promotes intergenerational equity, meaning that right now, we are paying off bonds, and so at a later time, once those are paid off, increasing amounts can be saved. And we found that these options were customizable to fit each city's debt schedule, since our bonds retire at different times, and also look at long-term forecasts for when we'll replace our facilities or our equipment. So option 3 for City of Tigard, they are looking at, something that involves inclining amounts of savings in approximately every 10 years, 1.25%, 1.75%, and on up as we go. And this is focusing on the Tigard debt retiring in 2046. For Lake Oswego, we are looking at a little fewer increments, but an initial savings of 1.15%, which is $1 million per year, and then increasing that savings in 2039 after the Lake Oswego debt retires up to 2.5%, which is $2.17 million per year.
When you say savings, you mean that's an add-on to the fee in order to build up savings for the depreciation, is that correct? You're not saving money, you're saving money that comes from the fees of 1.15%, correct? Maybe my question isn't,
We are,
what is the 1.15%?
1.15% is a percentage of the total 50-year renewal and replacement cost. So it's not a rate percentage, it's a total amount. So if you may think of it as simply $1 million per year. Now, and I do relate that to what potential rate impact it may have in the council report. But for Lake Oswego, we already do reserve for capital projects. And so discussions with our finance director showed that the 1.15%, the savings of $1 million per year devoted to a fund wouldn't have a current rate impact because it's already a rate that we plan for a replacement and repair in our city.
Okay,
It
thank
would be
you.
additional that could have a rate impact. Let me see if I have any more notes here.
Questions, anybody?
Yes, does anyone have
Okay,
questions?
Councilor Lamont.
Okay, so we're paying the bond off on one track, and then what you're saying is we want to, and we're already doing it, get a capital reserve going so we can fix things as we go along on another track. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So then when we hit 2038, then that bond number that's in our rates and our fees and what we're paying will go away because we paid the bond.
That's correct, yes.
And can then that our repair and replace shift up into that? It seems like there'd be savings time there. Because if I got this right, this assessment is really more on repair and replace, not to do another bond in 20 years or 30 years, right? So you're going to kind of MacGyver this thing as you go along, and then it's going to be still working for 60, 80 years because we're going along doing the right thing.
Correct, that's
Yeah.
the strategy, is for that option 3, once bonds are paid off, then there may be funds available to save a little bit more for repair and replacement.
So if they're going together, bond's done, goes away, then that number comes up, we're paying less theoretically back then, and I mean, it's a cost of living and all that other we got to deal with. But why wouldn't we program a bond in 30, 40, or 50 years for redo? It's just you need to keep this up all along, not just do it in one shot. Is that correct?
Incurring future debt is an option if we chose, and some communities do choose to do that, not to save or reserve any and incur debt for capital projects. That's what we did in this current project, and so that is an option.
But if I'm gathering, it's not as efficient as if we keep going along kind of fixing things. Is that?
I think a proactive approach is, in the long term, a best management strategy for a water system.
Councilor Wendland?
So you're confirming that the people 50 years ago, that the system that we replaced did not have this strategy. They just said, oh, we're going to just kick it down the road, right?
What was given to us.
Is that kind of what happened to us?
We did have a repair and replacement strategy previous to the Lake Oswego Tigard project. It may not have been as robust as what we are looking at now, and also we did invest in an expansion. This repair and replacement strategy also does not anticipate expansion of a future water system. It simply is looking at repairing and replacing what is there.
And then could you flip back to your last slide that has the city, that one? So during the times of red dips, we would have to finance that until we would replace it with reserves. Is that right? Is that kind of the, or are you delaying expenditures?
That may be the case. So while one thing that we may look at is tracking how expenditures are going, and at this point in approximately 2030, if additional funding is needed, it may be at that time that we need to consider reserving more. However, we do also recognize the analysis that went into determining when replacement and repair would occur was extremely conservative, and I believe it would be good to track how we are tracking on this strategy as well.
So I guess my point is that you go into the red in 2029 or 2028, which is kind of about 10 years before the debt retires in 2038. Is there a strategy, if you take it up to 1.25% or something, that would get us up to 2038 so that we're not in the red? And then I would assume rates would go down significantly in 2038 because the bond's paid off. Is that correct? From
Correct.
our, Sean? I know you're sitting over there, just waiting to come
I would
up.
defer to our finance director
Right.
to discuss what the rates would look like at that time.
And what happens, what's the delta when the water rates,
I'd have to
The-
look
mean-
at what their debt service is, but the better strategy would probably be to take those savings. I mean, the whole approach here is really to make the same people not pay for the current plant and the future plants. So
Right.
as soon as the debt's paid off, that would be the time to save those debt service payments, because the rates won't go up or down, they'll just stay, and use that as a reserve to pay for the next plant, upgrade or whatever. So you wouldn't really want to drop the rates like we did. Say, I think back in '95, we didn't raise water rates for over 10 years. They were just
Right.
flat. So when we did raise rates to actually build something, they went up 100% over 4 years. So to avoid that, you would want to build reserves in with the debt service payments that the people that are now using the plant, that aren't paying the debt service, the new, at that point, are now you reserve that for the next one. So in theory, yes, you could have pretty substantial debt, or rate reduction. I wouldn't suggest that, but you could do
right?
that.
But you, or should I say that you have more money to put
Yes.
aside in
I'd
reserves or
say
whatever?
Roughly
Is it
a third to
a third?
half of our operating budget is,
Related to debt?
it's debt service. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, we have a small one, our '07 bonds, our '05 bonds that were refinanced, that will come off a little earlier, but they're very small compared to the,
Okay.
like the.
I just think, when you look into 2036, it looks like you're spending another $5 million.
Yeah.
And-
So strategy at that point, you would probably have enough built into your operating budget. You could issue debt, and then you could pay it off once the other debt was paid
Once
off.
the-
But yeah,
okay.
you wouldn't have to come up with $5 million that year. You could.
You could stretch it until you start getting the
Yes.
reserves.
So what you
bigger.
implied to begin with is, you could
Okay.
do that.
Okay, but the idea is to not have the current ratepayers pay twice.
That's the idea, yeah, because
Right.
right now, they're paying for the plant that just built, but you don't want them to pay again,
Right.
saving at 4 or 5% right now, because they're still paying for the old one.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lamont?
One final question coming off of what the mayor had asked. So if we look at the 1.15%, you're saying these options are where we'd like to have this budgeted, but I think you just said that that's already in our rates. So how much are we going up or not? Hopefully not much or not at all. But if we're paying now that including repair and replace and the bond, is this over and above that, or is this, a chunk of this has got to be changed to make more money? What's the bottom line on the rates for the customers?
So right now, there is about $1 million in the rates to cover this. And in our current rates, we can cover $1 million
Yeah.
based on how more efficient the plan is than we had budgeted initially, and just how things have changed since 2014 when we did the rate models. We can right now reserve that and not change the rates at all. Assuming we don't add a bunch of CIP projects which change rates, but
So you're asking us then to just say that's great and keep going, or are you asking to increase it, or what's the ask here?
I think we'd like to continue with this. We did want to look at the various options, but also I think what's important is a devoted fund, so that money does go into a fund devoted to the Lake Oswego Tigard Partnership assets.
Which is already happening.
no. So the idea would be to make a fund, a reserve fund like we do for the general fund for reserve assets, do it for the water fund, so we can actually track this money separately, and it's not sitting in fund balance of the operating budget, so.
Where
it looks
somebody
like
might
it's
spend
growing.
it, right?
And yeah, you can actually see it grow and see if you're tracking to what you need. And so the idea would be to have another reserve fund specifically, to set it aside.
The council has to set that up, right?
Yeah, it has to be done by resolution.
Okay, Councilor Mans?
I know that you're simply, this is information only. Are you looking for direction on this at this point in time?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to instruct or ask that you continue to look at this particular option and bring it back to us. It seems to me to be the most logical way to achieve all of our ends with the partnership.
You're talking option
fund.
3, correct? You're
Option
talking
three.
option 3.
Yes, I'm sorry, option 3. Let me be more clear.
Thank you.
And then we'd
And
come,
to and to set the reserve fund up that you need.
Right.
Yeah.
kind of bring closure to that by setting up that separate reserve fund with a resolution.
Right, it's setting up a separate reserve fund, and then bringing it back, obviously, to let us see how that looks. Or, I don't know, do we need approval? Do we need to approve that, or is this a staff directed?
Well, as long as there's consensus, if they bring back a formal decision, you'll be bringing back a council decision for them to make. Yeah, but as long as there's consensus here, you don't necessarily need a formal.
Okay,
decision unless
thank
like to
you.
make one.
Do the rest of the council agree with that?
Sounds good.
Yes, good planning.
Okay. I
Thank
think
you.
you've got your direction then, Ms. Duncan.
We're out of the gate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll-
you.
And thank you for all the work.
Yeah, great work that they've done. We'll also share this with our partners, of course, at Tigard and confirm exactly which approach they'll be taking as well.
Thank you
As
very
Carrie
much.
mentioned, they can do it differently, that just,
You have to have money in the bank to pay for the bills,
exactly,
right?
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Director Cross
Thank you.
especially, thank you for that presentation.
Next is the private stormwater facility inspection program.
Don't go anywhere, Erica.
I know.
Thank you, Carrie. Good job.
I'm gonna switch who's coming up there. I'm going to switch seats here for a minute. Again, I'm just here as support for staff here in the engineering department. Before you, next item is 6.2, which is, again, mostly informational to tell you about a program that is long in the making. Actually, we've been required to do this for quite some time, and our staff will go through that in a minute. But we wanted to bring this forward to council so that you hear about it first before you see it on the street, so to speak. With me tonight is Sonia Johnson on my far right. She is our stormwater quality coordinator. Has been with the city about 3 years. And then Rob Amsbury is our stormwater group lead. The two of them have been working on this, putting together the program. And again, it all goes back to, several of you have been here long enough, we've talked about our MS4 permit. It's a requirement at the state level for stormwater quality, and making sure that our surface water runoff and our stormwater runoff is properly maintained, treated. And there's a variety of different requirements associated with the permit. This is just one of many, and so tonight what we're here to do is talk to you about the stormwater facility inspection program. Again, long overdue, but we finally got our ducks all in a row, and wanted to talk to you about how we're going to implement that program, and then also any feedback that you might have. So with that, I'm gonna let Sonia do the presentation, and Rob and I are here for questions.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for allowing us to speak to you today about the stormwater facility inspection program. The way that it works is that the MS4 permit required us to maintain our stormwater facilities because it increases water quality in our streams. They also required us to start inspecting these facilities, both public and private, and also have people who own these facilities, private facilities, to also be inspecting and maintaining these facilities. And the third thing that the permit required us to do was to create an inventory from at least 2012 to current. And we implemented that through the code by requiring maintenance of these stormwater facilities and inspections of these stormwater facilities. Further, the stormwater manual that we adopted in 2016 required certain specific criteria for the facility design, and we also required an operations and maintenance plan / agreement to be attached to property deeds so that people would know what they have on their facility. The reason why inspections are necessary is these are 3 facilities taken side by side, house 1, house 2, house 3, they're neighbors. These facilities were constructed at the same time, turned over to the homeowner at the same time. The facility on the left has a lot of weeds in it. It looks like it's got a lot of plants, but most of those are weeds. The house in the middle actually has been taking care of their stormwater planter, and the house on the right, everything is dead. And again, these were facilities that were built at the same time and turned over to the homeowners at the same time. So everybody has a different focus in their life, and we don't expect people to, landscape these things, but we would like them to at least take care of it like you would a lawn. Do the regular maintenance that's required. We do have quite a backlog. There's a 2012 permit, and they required us to start inspecting facilities from 2012 on. About 100, we figure about 100 facilities per year, so we've got at least 400, a little bit more of facilities that we have not inspected. We've done some inspections here and there where we've tried to pick up this program, and then we've never had a coalesced a standard operating procedures for doing this, and that's what we've done this time. The prioritization also helps with staff time, more efficiently using staff time, which is important also. One of the first prioritizations is we're going to look at the newer facilities first. Education is our key. We want to educate homeowners and homeowners associations about these facilities, what it is they have in their backyard or front yard, and how to maintain them, so that if we catch it early, they're going to have fewer facility repairs. They're going to catch it before it becomes a major sticker shock repair bill. It's like when you take care of your car. If you let it go and you let it go, pretty soon you've got a huge, huge bill, whereas if you maintain it every year, then it stays in better shape. The facility on the left there is an older facility, and that will take some major rehabilitation in order to get it functional again. The facility on the right is a newer facility. It was built actually last winter. And you can see there's a big difference. Being able to talk to the homeowners about the facility on the right and say, this spring when we have native plant sales, you can trade out plants that you need at a small cost, as opposed to the one on the left where they've got to rake it. I think there's some actual structural repairs that need to be done there. You can't see it, but when I was out there, I looked real quick, and there's some structural repairs. They've got to replant completely. So that's going to be a major sticker shock for that one. The second prioritization is land use. We've got commercial facilities, and we've got homeowner facilities, homeowner association facilities. The one on the left is commercial facilities, and those will be prioritized primarily because of the kinds of materials that can be dumped in them, the kinds of materials that are used around them, whereas a homeowner, you're not going to have those kinds. You shouldn't. We would hope that you wouldn't have those same kinds of hazardous materials. Also, around most commercial facilities, traffic is a big detriment to plant life, especially for vegetated facilities. Just the wind and the dust that the traffic brings with it can be hard on the plants, and a homeowner, a residential facility is not going to have that same kind of impact. So they require less maintenance overall. And the final prioritization criteria is the amount of impervious area that each facility is treating. Some properties have a planter, that's it. It treats the roof, and they don't have anything else that they need to take care of. Other properties, like this one, is a fairly large property with a fairly large home on it. They have, I'm showing 6, they actually have 7 stormwater facilities on their property. And so that's gonna take more maintenance. It's also treating a lot more impervious areas. So it's gonna have if these get maintained, these bigger impervious area facilities get maintained, then we're going to have a greater positive effect on the water quality in the streams. Once we make our prioritization list, we have to do the document research, and that's going to include things like looking at the site plan, the as-built, how it was constructed, what goes where, what part of the roof goes here, does the garage go to a different facility, that kind of a thing. We'll also look at the stormwater report that the engineer drew or created when he designed the facilities. Certain facilities are called underground injection control, or UICs. That's like a dry well or infiltration trench. Those need approval from DEQ, and so we'll also be looking for that. And if they don't have approval, then we'll notify the homeowner and DEQ. And it's, for most private facilities, it's not a big deal. They just fill out a form, pay a $100 fee, that's it. But DEQ does need to know where these things are. We'll also look at the O&M plan, the operations and maintenance plan. What were they required to do? We're not gonna, if they were required to do a certain set of items in 2016 and say it's 2021 and we require more things or different things, we're gonna stick with the one that they were given. And also we'll be looking for a stormwater certification from the engineer. Currently, we require the design engineer to certify that the facility was built according to his specifications. So it protects the city and it really protects the owner of the facility. The things that we'll be looking for on the inspection is that we will be sending out a notification letter 30 days in advance of a proposed inspection date. When the homeowner gets, or homeowner, I keep saying homeowner, but I mean is private owner, private facility owner. When the private facility owner gets that notification letter that, hey, we're going to come inspect your facility, they will look at the inspection date, and if it doesn't align with their schedule, we will reschedule. It's a negotiation. We'll reschedule as long as it's within 30 days, because we know that people have various things going on in their lives, and they can't necessarily say, hey, I'm going to be there, or give us access on the date that we randomly choose. On the facility inspections, and I'll go into this a little bit further, but we're going to be looking for structural integrity, outfall, inlets, outlets. What is how does that facility infiltrate? If it's meant to infiltrate, does it, or is it, does it pond and then nothing goes anywhere? And also for vegetated facilities, we'll be looking at plant coverage, because the plants actually slow the water down and provide some uptake of constituents. So structural integrity, we'll be looking at things like on the left there's a pipe with a penetration through a liner, and that isn't waterproof. You can see that the water is coming down on the bottom. That is supposed to be waterproof. So we would be looking at things like that. The middle picture, you can see that there's some erosion occurring, and we don't like to see that either, because that means that the dirt is actually going, it has a tendency to get to the outlet and then into our streams, and the fish don't like that. And then the picture on the right is a facility that is in definite disrepair, structural integrity. So that would be like a major repair, that one. But they will be looking for stuff like that. The next thing we'll be looking for is for infiltrating facilities, we'll be looking at capacity. The picture on the left there is compacted. There's no water that's actually going to infiltrate in that facility. We'll also be looking at is a catch basin, is it full of sediment, is it full of leaves? Can stormwater actually get into it? The bottom picture shows a clean catch basin. You can see all the way down to the bottom with the ruler there that actually is sitting on the bottom, that you can see the end of the ruler. On pervious pavers, we'll be looking to find out if they're sealed or not, and if they're sealed, then that means that it's like asphalt, you know, it's no different from asphalt. And if they have vegetation between the pavers, you know, what does that vegetation look like? Is it in good shape, or does it need to be replanted again? The third thing that we'll be looking at is plant coverage. Again, these are for vegetated facilities. The facility on the left is a commercial facility, and it has seen its better days. Most of the plants that you see there are invasive species like blackberry, English hawthorn, things like that, and there aren't very many of them. We're currently working with that property owner on getting the facility rehabbed. The facility on the right is in good shape. It's actually a 5-year-old facility, and so even if it's older, that doesn't mean that it's in bad shape. I know I've been showing some not good facilities, but some of them are older and still in good shape. After the inspection, we'll come back, we'll create an inspection report that we'll send to the homeowner along with a proposed inspection date, the next inspection date. Some, again, homeowner, private facility owner is what I mean. The inspection date, if there are things that they need to fix, we'll propose 30 days. And then if they can't get it done in 30 days, we're willing to negotiate on, depending on what the facility condition is, we're willing to negotiate on giving them more time. If it is in good shape, it may be, we may not come back for a year, we may not come back for 3 years, and if it's in excellent shape, we may not come back for 5 years. And that also allows us to attack our backlog. For facilities that have passed their inspection, and the next inspection is in the future, you know, a year, 3 years, 5 years, we'll go ahead and update our GIS to build that inventory that we're required by the permit to do. Our goal for this program is primarily education. We want people to know what is in their front yard and backyard, or for commercial facilities, what they need to do to help the water quality. It is also, another goal is to comply with the permit, and then ultimately to improve our water quality of our streams. That concludes our presentation. Thank you again for your patience and your time. Are there any questions?
Questions? Quinlan?
When you say education, do we have materials that we send them? I found the pictures very helpful to find out, I mean, to have you, because I mean, it's kind of like I could look at them and I wouldn't exactly know necessarily as a property owner what is perfect and what's not. Do we have educational material that we send on the inspection notice so that they could be prepared and find out kind of, a lot of people, when they get inspections, they get nervous and they get kind of uptight and lose sleep and whatever. And sometimes if you say, this is kind of what we're looking for, then they go, oh, I'm kind of there, or I'm not. And maybe they'll have it all fixed up before you actually come and inspect.
Hence the 30-day pre-notification.
Right.
We don't have any brochures or anything like that, but especially if they're there with us at the inspection, they don't need to be. We're going to encourage them to be there. We're going to talk to them about, you know, this is kind of what, these are kind of plants that you would want in this kind of area so that they plant the right place and right plant in the right place. We'll also talk about easy ways to maintain these facilities. You know, it's easy to clean out, like with the erosion, just throw some dirt down and use a shovel to kind of break things up. So there's going to be things like that that we can talk about. The inspection report is also going to talk in plain language to the what they need to do. We'll also include pictures of what we found, and I think that just by the first inspections, I don't expect very many facilities to completely pass with flying colors. I think there's always going to be a little bit of stuff that needs to be done, and then on the second inspection, I expect quite a few of the facilities to pass. Just because my hope is that by attacking the newer facilities, not attacking, but by inspecting the newer facilities first, they aren't going to require major repairs. You know, it'll be like, hey, you need to throw some compost down there or some dirt. Rake the planter in order to get the dirt back up so that it can infiltrate. It's going to be a lot of education in that respect, but actual specific things to hand people, we haven't created anything.
People are very used to, like, frequently the top 20 questions, you know, it's kind of like everyone's looking on the internet now, how do I bake do a turkey? I mean, I think a reference point might be very helpful, especially to engage with people, and they kind of, you know, you can put specifics down, but you might think long-term to figure out how you can communicate the messaging so that it gets, so you can cut down, you can make your inspection time efficient, and also people with having to have a permit, they kind of know the ground rules up front of what you're looking at. So just food for thought.
One thing that we will be providing to each of these property owners or facility owners are the original design and planting plans and the operation and maintenance plans, because we don't expect a new homeowner to get that from the developer necessarily, but the ones that we have on record, that'll be some of the first information we provide to them. And then beyond that, we can certainly ask questions and visit the sites with them and talk particulars about their facilities.
There's also a wealth of information on the internet, and if they're interested, when we talk to them, we can provide links for, you know, things that how to maintain if it's not clear in their O&M plan.
One of the things too that we would encourage is that if homeowners or property owners have a landscape company, that they participate in that on-site inspection as well, because they can learn how to properly maintain it as what it is, which is a water quality facility, not just landscaping. So there is a difference in different plants and things. So it's a long-term educational effort, but your suggestions are good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Lamont?
Can you clarify when you mentioned DEQ compliant? Now, if you're just a residential homeowner in a small lot with a rain garden, you have to get a DEQ permit for that site? No. I thought once our engineering director signed off, we're good, right?
Well,
So
if you
how does
have
DEQ come in?
if you have a infiltration trench, which is a specific facility, or if you have a dry well, then you need the DEQ.
Even on a residential small lot?
Oh, yes.
Wow. And then when outside engineering certification, that's a private engineer certifying that what
Correct.
they're doing is right?
Correct.
That's required when
For
the
everything.
property is developed. We require the engineering certification, and that's one of the checkoffs is that they have the DEQ approval for the UICs. But I think it's important for the first, second, third generation homeowners to know that that's a necessity that they have in their package with that facility, and that it has to follow certain criteria that's laid out by DEQ when you have one of those UICs.
And my last one is, at the end of the report, you had said there's 8 hours for residential or 12 to 16 hours for non-residential. That's staff time, is that correct?
Correct.
Per inspection.
Correct.
So it could be 2 hours, but it could be up to 8 by the time you file the paperwork. So knowing how busy we are in the engineering world, are we going to catch can? How do we even get these hours into what we're doing?
That's why it's taken
Very
us
carefully,
7
right?
years to get to even to this point, to be honest. We are concerned about, you know, how are we going to fit this in, but we've got to try so that we can at least be saying that we're making an effort on our annual reports to DEQ for the MS4 permit. We'll assess it, you know, in 6 months or a year. How long did it really take? Did it take 8 hours, or have we got this down to 4? I have no idea. It's really kind of a guess at this point until we get out there.
Last thing is maybe in Hello, we could promote some of the good people that are keeping these things going for
Absolutely.
5 years and give them a certificate or a coffee date with Martha Bennett or something, just to make sure people see what a real rain garden is.
Yes. Well, there's some great examples out there, absolutely, and the more information, more pictures that we compile from the inspections, we can tell more of that story in outlets as you speak of, yes.
And
you.
the,
I can
You'll
buy
be
the
the first-
coffee, I
you'll
can buy
be
the
the first
coffee and
one.
they don't have to talk to me.
the staff time is expected to decrease after a facility, the more inspections that a facility undergo, right? We don't have to do that document research. It's already there in front of us in a folder. So that's going to be the big initial staff time for these inspections.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next item is 6.3 Clackamas County Library District Task Force.
Now for something completely different.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Melissa Kelly. I'm the library director for the city. And with me are guests from Clackamas County, Catherine Cole, who is the library manager for Link Library. We call it Library Network, but Link Library Services, I think is on your official title. And Greg Williams, the deputy director of Business and Community Services for Clackamas County. And we're here today to give you information about the Library District Task Force. So I'll just go ahead and get started. The Clackamas County Board of County Commissioners has authorized the formation of a Library District Task Force, requesting appointments from each library city to examine issues facing the district. The task force has been formed to address concerns raised by stakeholders at the time of the Gladstone and County settlement agreement related to library service levels and the original purpose of the district, as well as concerns raised by library directors regarding the long-term sufficiency and sustainability of district funding. Library directors voiced their concerns in a letter to the Library District Advisory Committee in 2018, and a copy of that letter was included in your packet, pages 11 through 14 of Attachment 1. It should be noted that Clackamas County Library District is comprised of libraries and cities with very different resources, both in terms of district and city revenue streams. Our library in Lake Oswego is able to provide a very high level of service to our residents, whereas many of the other libraries in the district are struggling to provide the core services needed by their communities. Next, I'll go into the scope of what the task force will be covering. The task force is expected to convene in January 2020, including 3 subcommittees that will focus on the areas of services, funding, and governance. And each library city may have up to 2 representatives and 1 vote on each of those, on the task force and each subcommittee. The services subcommittee will look at questions such as what services do district residents need from their libraries, both now and in the future? What are the core services and service levels all district residents should receive? How should service levels and service delivery be measured? What services are best provided locally and what services should be provided or supported centrally? The funding subcommittee will examine topics such as what levels of funding are required to sustainably address operational needs district-wide? What levels of funding are required to sustainably address capital needs district-wide? What are the mechanics and options for creating service area capital districts? How can insufficient, unsustainable, or unequitable funding levels be addressed? What should permissible uses of district funds be? Do the current service area boundaries meet the needs of the district? And does the current distribution formula meet the needs of the district? The governance subcommittee will address topics such as are changes to the master order, master IGA, or capital IGA needed? How do we ensure core services are provided and desired outcomes are achieved district-wide? How are issues of district-wide importance discussed and decisions made? What should the role of the Library District Advisory Committee be? And do suggested changes make voter approval necessary or desirable? Those are just some of the questions that may be looked at by the task force and subcommittees. Those groups will be encouraged to develop their own charges and may look at other questions as well. And the task force and subcommittees are scheduled to meet over an 18-month period, concluding with a final report and recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners in their dual role as the governing body for the district. And I'm looking forward to this process. I think the task force has potential to bring significant improvements to services district-wide, but there are a few potential challenges to be aware of. The current distribution formula is based on two components: city assessed value and unincorporated population served. And City of Lake Oswego has the highest assessed value in the district, but one of the smaller unincorporated population served. We, in addition to the 38,000 city residents, we also serve about 5,000, or about 3% of the county's unincorporated population. Now, overall, our library receives 16% of the district distribution and serves 12% of the district population. So with the task force expected to examine the equity of the distribution formula and potentially reevaluating the service area boundaries, staff are prepared to defend our funding levels. And we're aided by the fact that the IGA for the district includes a protection ensuring that 100% of the city service providers' boundaries are returned to that city, specifically related to amendment of the IGA. Any amendment that would amend that portion of the formula, providing for the return of 100% of the revenue collected within a city's service provider's boundaries to such city service provider shall require the unanimous consent of all cities serving on the district advisory committee. And since we will have one of those votes. Yes. So in terms of desired outcomes for residents, I think there are a lot of good outcomes could come from this for our residents in Lake Oswego. While we do provide a high level of service to our residents right now, there are the funding and service levels of the other libraries in the district do have a significant impact on services to our residents in key areas. In fact, some of our most significant services rely on countywide participation. For example, meeting user demand for materials. All of our libraries in the district strive to agreed upon collection development guidelines, but there just aren't enough copies in the county to meet patron demand for those popular items. Hold lists for popular items regularly exceed 400 people waiting for a title, which means library users have to wait months to receive a popular item. A common request is for more digital content, particularly e-audiobooks, but our two e-content contracts are at the county level. So we're basically limited to what the struggling libraries can afford in that area. It's noteworthy that Lake Oswego Library provides 7 additional e-resources that the other district libraries cannot afford, including e-audiobooks, digital magazines, online courses, and streaming films. So it would be great if all of the county residents were able to access those services. Meeting user demand and community need for equitable service delivery is another example. All of the libraries in the county share the philosophy of meeting the needs of all of our residents and removing barriers to access. But there are a few notable examples that we're not able to implement, which include mail delivery to homebound residents and the elimination of overdue fines. I'll speak really quickly on those topics. Overdue fines are a significant barrier to equitable access to the library, particularly for families with children and low-income individuals. And there is support among district libraries to eliminate fines. However, a number of the libraries rely heavily on that income and feel that losing it would result in reduced public service hours, which is unacceptable in terms of access. And in Lake Oswego, we do homebound delivery currently to a very limited number of folks. We limit it to people that are completely immobile and homebound, but we would like to be able to expand that to folks that have limited mobility or other reasons why they can't get to the library in person to receive services. Another area is meeting user demand for technology and capital improvements. It took our district over 8 years after deciding to implement a technology infrastructure improvement to be able to fund, for all the libraries to be able to fund it. So I feel we could have offered a better library experience to our users in Lake Oswego at least 5 years earlier. I'm speaking specifically of RFID and the technology that came with that, if the other libraries in the district were able to fund that as we would have been able to. While our library is in a good financial position compared to some others in the district, we are most notably unable to meet demands for physical space. Our most significant need is for additional facility space. And in 2006, now more than 13 years ago, we had 3 different consultant reports recommend library facilities over 64,000 square feet to meet the needs of our Lake Oswego users. And our current library facility is less than half of that size at 27,000 square feet. Community requests for quiet study rooms, collaborative workspaces, meeting rooms, event spaces, technology spaces, early literacy spaces, maker spaces, and adequate seating in general are currently unmet. Capital construction costs aside, we would need additional ongoing revenue to sufficiently operate an expanded facility. So I think that's another great outcome that could come from the task force for our residents. So in conclusion, the task force will bring key stakeholders together to build support, to seek additional operating and capital revenue, which I believe would benefit our residents in these areas. So next I'll go into who we are recommending for the task force and subcommittees. City staff are recommending the following appointments due to subject area expertise. Myself as the library director to serve on all 4 of those committees. Martha Bennett, our city manager, to serve on the main task force. Jackie Seward-Shade, our current library district advisory committee representative and our library advisory board co-chair, to serve on the services subcommittee. Jackie brings an understanding of the district as it currently exists, as well as an understanding of our library service level and the service levels of the other libraries in the district. Sean Cross, our city finance director, to serve on the funding subcommittee. And Sherry Swackhammer, the current library advisory board member, to serve on the governance subcommittee. Sherry served as director of county assets for Multnomah County for the last 15 years before she retired last year, and brings a solid understanding of the concepts and structures that the governance subcommittee will be examining. So thank you for your time today and for your support. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. And do you have any questions for me or for our wonderful guests from the county?
Great presentation.
Councilman
Oh,
Mott.
I'm sorry, I thought you were leaning towards me. A great overview, and this is some new ways to kind of get at some new ways to do things. And the first question I have, which is the one I always bring up, is do you know what we're paying as Lakeville residents for library services versus our unincorporated neighbors that are within our service boundary? Because that keeps coming up in these discussions, that they're not paying their share of what they're getting when they come to our library.
Perhaps you can help me answer that question.
I can do my best. Good afternoon, Greg Williams, Deputy Director of Business and Community Services. Is the question what rate?
Well, we've had people actually say to us, I don't like the city, and I don't want to be in the city, and we're paying less for library than you are, but we're coming to your library, or we're using your parks.
So I think it might be a Sean question.
Or a
because
Sean
I think
question.
the unincorporated residents are paying the county district the same rate.
Correct.
But because we add a subsidy to Lake Oswego's libraries, then Lake Oswego residents and taxpayers
It's
are
over
paying
above.
slightly more. So do you want to sort of describe what the share is of district funds versus general funds? It's like $1 million a year, right?
Yes.
So wait, so we add on to our rate so we can do more services.
Yes.
Unincorporated folks can come and use those services, but they're paying the lower base rate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, do you know the difference? Is it
Not
50
off the tip
cents
of
or,
my
no?
head. No.
Okay. I'd like to see that, because we keep getting asked that with annexation. Not tonight, but if you could let the council know, that would be great.
Other questions?
I guess, I ask a quick one.
Go ahead, question.
Oh, just to finish, because we were just having a sidebar. So that's something we should look at, is equity between unincorporated and incorporated. Because we need to make these things work, and we need the revenue. And we have pockets of unincorporated that are talking to us positively about annexing in. Others don't want to, and we just want equity for our residents, that's all. Thank you.
Now time for your question.
I'll do it really quick. So in essence, this committee is going to be tasked with the idea of trying to raise revenue countywide for better library services? Is that the
Yes.
end game?
I think different stakeholders have different goals for this task force, and we don't know what the outcome will be. The library.
Yeah, but you had a pretty strong
the library
letter at a
directors.
time.
Yes, but
So-
that's our goal.
Okay, but without the intergovernment agreement between everybody can't be changed through this committee. It would have to be through all city councils and everyone, so that we would have some sort of an input later then, right? If you were to change something, or, okay. So, okay, that was all that I,
I think the
And thank you.
formula for changing anything in the IJ is a 2/3 vote, isn't it? Other than the
Other than
allocation
allocation.
formula of all the revenue from a particular district going to that district. But otherwise, it would be a vote of the county board as the library district board and 2/3 of all the cities and other entities.
okay, thank you.
And if I may, Counselor, one of our board's goals in having this district task force to get together, as Director Kelly said, we have a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different concerns and a lot of different issues. Our goal is to provide a forum where those conversations can happen, and where hopefully, if some recommendations come out, those could be presented by the group in a unified fashion to help move forward with it. So our goal is to facilitate those conversations. And as Melissa says, one of those conversations that has come up with certain stakeholders, library directors, and some of our district advisory committee members has been looking at the possibility of going out for an increase in the district rate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything you wanted to add?
Councilor Mann.
I don't think so.
Do you need direction or? Sorry, do you need direction or approval for the,
So the appointments will come to you at your December 5th business meeting. I think that before we saw this item on your agenda, we wanted to make sure they had a chance to ask Melissa what this was all about.
excellent, thank you.
I
Thank
think
you
they're
very
good
much for
picks.
visiting.
Councilor
mission.
Kohlhoff, did you have a question? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Next, I guess it's your turn, Mr. Cross, master fees and charges.
You read the whole thing?
Very concise.
Councilor Windland asked if you could do corrections.
Oh. Good evening, Mayor, Councilors. Sean Cross, Finance Director. Today, we're going to do master fees and charges. This is probably one of the least exciting ones I think we've done in a while, because I'm just going to jump right to the end. Most of these are just indexing things to different indices. There really isn't any, like last year where there were some different ideas that we would try, look at different things. This truly is almost everything just being basically indexed. So, but, we'll go over some slides for utilities like we do every year with a little 4 or 5 year forecast. But, really some of the things that we're going to kind of jump over is, planning and building. It's to the CPIU of the western, region now, because the Portland metropolitan area went away because we were too small. So now we use that. So that's for planning and building and many other departments. But really, the utilities I'll start with. So here's like the 4 or 5 year forecast for the Stormwater Fund. What you can kind of see here, what I kind of want to point out a little bit is on the y-axis, depending on which fund we're talking about, the graphs will look more impressive, except you look at the numbers, this only goes up to $2.5 million. So this is our smallest fund. But what you can kind of see is in 1920, so basically took the budget for 1920 and then just used, if I kept, in this case, a 7% revenue increase that we keep trying to do because this fund doesn't have a lot of money. And then expenditures out at 3%. And then taking what is funded in the CIP and just kind of see how does the fund balance trend, and how does, you can kind of see the net, the blue is the net operation, so net revenue, or operational revenues less operational expenses. And then you can kind of see how much capital we're doing. So if the capital is larger than the blue bar, if the green bar is larger than the blue bar, we're going to be drawing down our fund balance, is basically what I'm trying to say. And you kind of see here, in stormwater, you can kind of see it's coming down. That's because we just did D Avenue in 1819, and Wembley's projected for 1920, 2021, so that brings it down. And then we spend the next 3 years trying to build it back up to do the next project. It still, takes into account between $1 million and $1.5 million worth of capital every year. It's that dig once, try to do the things with the streets at the same time. Next is the street fund, and this is the first time this has ever happened. You can kind of see that the fund balance actually goes below this at one point, because when we were adding projects for the bonds that we just sold, so you can kind of see here on the y-axis, it goes up to 14 million. We added too much in projects in the funded column. So what we were able to do after working through it with the city engineer today, if we simply just slid 2 3-year projects over 1 year, so let's see, the Meadows project and the Lakeview Boulevard project, so that we put they did do a little bit over on Lakeview while they're doing Boone's Ferry. But if we move that project 1 year than what was in the CIP, it looks more like this. It looks more like what we were saying. Instead of adding, say, $14 or $13 million worth of projects, we added about $17 million worth of projects. So that kind of, we need to bring it back by about $4 million. And when we do that, this is what the graph in the street fund looks like. The sewer fund is always a fun one, especially with all the talk about, do we use Portland? Do we do the other thing? We're kind of still looking at that. You can kind of see at the end of the 5 years, we are just above $10 million in the fund balance. What this doesn't show is the following year, there's the condition, and there's still another $6 million of the Foothills Interceptor sewer that needs to be done. And that brings us down to about the fund balance we're looking for in the sewer fund, which is roughly $4 to $5 million. We want about $1 million in operating reserve. We also want about a 3% capital reserve of our assets. So we do want about a $3 or $4 million reserve for capital. So we just want to keep that one about that. But I just wanted to point out, yes, there is money. Yes, we have it there. It's there because we have a big, huge $10, $12 million project that we're looking to do in Foothills as soon as we know what we're connecting to. And then the water fund. And the same thing here. You can kind of see it goes up and it goes down, but then we start doing reservoir things, fixing more of our infrastructure there in 23, 24, and you can kind of see the fund balances projected to come down at that point. And you can also see that we do have the ability with this to, over these 5 years, put $1 million into a reserve and still have a $5 million reserve.
This is what we were talking about earlier with.
Exactly. I'm just
Great.
tying this into what we talked about.
Great, so some
Three
high,
study
some low,
sessions,
and
yeah.
you spread it out, yep.
I always like to show how our annual build consumption is. You can kind of see in 9-10, that's before we had tier rates for single-family dwellings. You can kind of see it dropped off drastically, and then it's been pretty level since then. But the ones without the tier rates, it's just stayed even. But the other bigger point is that the single-family dwellings are between 75% and 80% of all water consumed in Lake Oswego. This is what we are suggesting the increases be for the utilities. They were exactly what we said they needed to be last year for this year that we projected out, except the street one, which is tied to the ENR CCI for the 20 cities, and it came in at 1.3%. So this year would be probably one of the lowest increases we've ever seen at 2.9% for the utility bill. It's based on a single-family dwelling, based on 10 units of water and then 8 units for sewer on the variable rate. So, and this is kind of what we're looking at for the next 2 years, what we would suggest. In our rate models, we have a 20-year rate model for water and a 20-year rate model for sewer. We're about 5 to 6 years through it, and we're tracking right along on our revenues where we should be. And these are the rates that were plugged in there that would get us to where we need. And that's why we can kind of say, yeah, 2%. As long as some big major capital thing doesn't break that we need to then replace a reserve or something, these are the rates that we're looking at. Streets, we don't know because it's tied to the CCI and it averages about 3% like any other CPA. So we just use 3%. Is there any questions over the rest of the book? Like I said, it's a lot of just indexing to different indices issues. This was actually kind of nice.
Yeah, on page 62, no, I'm just kidding. No,
Oh, I do have one from
Of
Mark.
the red line version of the non-red line version?
I guess we
line
do
version.
have a question.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a Sean or Martha question, but we had talked about a study of the rates, remember under Manager Lazenby, I don't know if you were aware, but it was about 6 months ago, about just looking at where we're at. Is the base too low, too high? Is it hard for lower income folks to, the first tier versus you
Yeah.
are spending more on water, you go up.
Yeah, I believe that's Mr. Lazenby was suggesting that we actually eliminate the inclining blocks, the consumption-based water rates. And Sean, I don't know if you want to go back to that slide. I would really recommend that you not move in that direction, because what you'll have to do that, to make the rate fund whole, is you'll have to raise the base. So lower income folks who use less water will pay more, and folks who are consuming water for irrigation, which is a discretionary use. I realize some people like to have green lawns, but it really is a discretionary use. They'll pay less overall, and so you're shifting
That's what we
the
wanna be
burden. So I guess
careful of,
I
right?
wouldn't recommend that we pursue that, especially because it appears to have leveled off our consumption of water, which from the perspective of managing the water system is a really good thing.
But that's exactly right, is to not burden someone not using the water and,
Right.
and having to pay a higher rate. That means we're not doing it.
Unless you as a council want to do it, I
don't know
wouldn't
if we do,
recommend it.
But it just, we were being careful.
Scott's at home right now throwing a dart at the TV, so, or maybe not.
sticky dart.
Let's hope he's not actually watching the council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Cross.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break and then come back here.
These poor guys.
We're on the home stretch.
But we can't get through,
What?
but I figured we could have gotten through those in 10 minutes.
No, it's
Good job,
complicated.
Sean.
Yay. Okay, we're back in session. Next item is Resolution 1957, transfer of control of the Northwest Fiber. Yes, sir.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Yes, Mayor, I'll introduce it then. This resolution would be consenting the transfer of control of the franchisee of the cable franchise that was granted to Frontier Communications to Northwest Fiber LLC. And again, under the cable franchises negotiated through the Metropolitan Area Communications Commission, the member jurisdictions, and well as MAC on their behalf, do need to consent to the transfer of control of the franchise. And appended to my very short introductory memo is the MAC staff report. And I believe we will have a presentation here. If the gentlemen could introduce themselves from MACC about.
Right. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Thaddeus Gerard, MAC Administrator, and you have obviously have the staff report. I'll let Jack.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Jack Phillips with Frontier Communications. Would you like me to?
Thank you for your report.
Move to adopt.
Would you like me to go ahead?
There's, yes. please
Okay.
go ahead.
I don't think you need to go
Short version.
point by point, but
Okay, I can be very brief, but we are asking tonight for your consent to the transfer of the the ownership of the cable franchise from Frontier Communications Corporation to Northwest Fiber. And as you probably know, we are one of the cable providers in the area. Just real quickly, I think it's a good transaction. Frontier, as you may know, has been in some kind of difficult financial situation since 2016 when we did an acquisition, took on a lot of debt. This transaction would transfer the ownership of our operations in Washington, Oregon, Montana, and Idaho to a company that is based in the Northwest that's been focused, the leadership of that organization has got a good background in building out broadband and cable services or video services in the Pacific Northwest. The employees will remain in place. Companies transferring over in its entirety. Just one thing I would mention, it is a new company, and as I said, the employees are transferring over. One of the protections, I guess, from a consumer perspective is that the system, Frontier will at least initially provide the billing and operation support systems so that for up to a 3-year period at the discretion of Northwest Fiber. We're going to turn that up December 8th of this year, so the customers will actually be transitioned off to the new system so that when we get to the close of the transaction, they're already functional, they've already been operating in parallel, so that there's, the risk of system problems is minimized. Basically, it's a little more difficult than this, but changing the logo on the bill. Basically, think this is a good transaction for the communities we serve because it's a well-financed company. It's good for the employees because the being transferred over to a company that is well-financed. They'll have about $500 million of liquidity at closing, and it's good, I think, for our customers. We've been kind of limited in our ability to continue to invest in the network as well as promote our products, and they're well-funded for that. So with that, I'll answer any questions if you have any.
questions, anybody?
What if we don't approve it? You're still going to, there's,
Councilor,
transaction happens, correct?
what's that?
If we don't approve it, the transaction still occurs.
No, it does not.
No?
It has to be unanimously approved by all the
True,
members of
Mac.
MAC.
Correct. All 11 jurisdictions that are affected have to vote yes for
Okay.
it to go through.
Councilor Kohlhoff, did you have any questions? No. All right, thank you.
I move to adopt Resolution 19-57, approving transfer of the control of franchisee and transfer of the Frontier Communications Cable franchise to Northwest Fiber LLC.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Thank
Okay,
you.
gentlemen, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Sorry you had to sit through a long
Next,
meeting.
next item on our agenda is the consent agenda.
No?
Yep.
Yep.
7-2 was taken out.
Item 7.2 has been removed, so
Okay.
that'll come to us in December.
Move to accept the consent agenda?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, information from council. Anybody have anything they need to tell us about?
Do we not do 8.1?
That was on consent? 8.1 was on consent?
Was it consent?
That was
Oh,
consent.
Sorry.
Rio?
Sorry, my bad, my bad. Yes, if I may, quickly. Talk about what's going on. Veterans Day at Foothills was very well attended. I was so pleased to see everyone there. It was a solemn yet joyful event. The library, everything is going swimmingly at the library. One thing I will bring up, and I won't get into it, I'll send you more information if you like, is Macmillan, a large publishing house, is radically changing their fee structure for ebooks. This will greatly impact many libraries. So there is currently a national boycott of Macmillan going on, and Clackamas County, I'm not sure, Multnomah has joined. I won't say that Clackamas County has joined, but this is something that will certainly impact our users and could determine how other booksellers schedule their fees. So again, I'd be happy to send council information on that if they would like that. And other than that, the elevator at the library will be going out of service for 6 to 8 weeks at some point in time. Not exactly sure when. They're working on ways of making sure people can access the library. So thank you.
Anybody else have information? Hey, do you have reports of officers, anything? Okay. In that case, we're done, we're adjourned.
So,
Thank
That's
you,
it.
everybody.
Well done, at 6
any,
o'clock, you did
any
it.
drinks? Any drinks tonight?
Thank you, Counselor Kohlhoff. We'll be hanging up now.